Okay, it's a great question. I've given it a lot of thought, and I just recently developed a program called The Art of Advocacy for my law firm at White & Case. And what we did, I think, reflects what I think is important for leadership as well as what's important for an advocate. Because at the end of the day, being a great leader, I think, means being a great advocate. And so what we did is we started with what I think is the foundation of being a great advocate or a great leader. You have to be very thoughtful. You have to be very analytical. And so we went all the way back to the Greeks, and we studied Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and learned to appreciate that not only do you have to be analytical, but you also have to understand emotional pulls, and you also have to work on your credibility. Then we went to a second day, and we went to West Point, and we had a general talk to us about mission statements and developing a strong mission statement, and then developing the strategy necessary to implement the mission statement and the tactics necessary to implement the strategy. But at the end of the day, the character of the leader really matters. He explained the difference between George Washington and Benedict Arnold. They had the same type of background, same basic qualities, same level of success. One had great character and one didn't, and that made all the difference. Then we shifted gears completely, and we brought in a person who teaches screenplay writing and at University of Southern California, and he is in the Hollywood Hall of Fame, and he told us how to tell a compelling story. Because at the end of the day, a great leader has to be able to get people to follow and to agree with them, and being able to convey what you're trying to convey in a great story really matters. And so he spoke about how you do that and how you make it focused and how you make it simple. And then we went over to London, and we had a Picasso scholar teach us about how to take incredibly complicated thoughts and ideas and make them simple, like Picasso did with the stroke of a pen or the stroke of a brush. And we went through the Picasso, there's a bull seriograph where he starts with an incredibly detailed picture of a bull. And it goes through a series of plates, and by the end, there's just a couple of brush strokes, but you know that it's a bull. And that is, again, I think a quality of leadership is being able to take very complicated concepts and make them simple and understanding. And then to wrap it up, we went to Stratford-on-Avon with a Shakespearean scholar who told us all about Shakespeare and conflict. And we read back over the play Julius Caesar and all that involves in understanding human nature. And I think all of those characteristics come into play. So when I talk about great, if you had a great leader, it would combine the ancient Greeks, it would combine the great generals, it would combine people who can tell a very compelling story, and people who can do it simply like Picasso and then pull it all together like Shakespeare. I think one pitfall sometimes that leaders fall into is a sense of arrogance. They've been very successful, or they wouldn't be in that leadership role. And sometimes, and lawyers, I think, fall into this pretty quickly. You become overconfident. You start closing off areas of debate instead of opening them up because you feel like you know best. And that almost inevitably leads to falling in that pitfall. And that follows then with one thing that I think leaders sometimes lose sight of, is the need to communicate. And by communicating, sometimes leaders think that's how effective am I in delivering a message. And what they really need to be focusing on is how effective am I in listening to a message. And that's the real essence of communicating. I worked for a company that had a long history of success, had won not virtually every case, but every case. And while I was there, we suddenly started losing those cases and lost 4 or 5 cases in a row. And it caused us to go back and no longer say, well, we're doing this because that's what we've always done in the past and we succeeded. We had to start from the ground floor and build up. And it caused us to be much more introspective in some ways, but also much more open. Again, I go back to the listening, to what people were thinking, which may have been different than what they were thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And were we willing to try new ideas? And were we willing to learn from the failure? And not say, well, that was the jury's mistake, or we made a mistake here. Was it perhaps something that was sending a signal to us that we needed to change? And I think that was an incredibly challenging situation and required us, I think, to be a bit more humble than perhaps we had been in the past. I will say, I think from the very beginning, I will confess, the night before I started law school, I actually came to the camp and I'd never been to the University of Tennessee campus before, and just sort of walked around the building. And it was inspiring. And I think being willing to be inspired and then to develop a passion for what you're doing it's a gift that I think the faculty, my colleague, my fellow students sort of gave me, and it's carried through for almost 40 years. I'm not saying I haven't had bad days as a lawyer, but I have never had a day where I regretted going to law school. What I look for is a passion for the practice. I like to work with people that are passionate about what they're doing. And I think most people prefer that type of approach. It carries you through the long days, the long nights, the early mornings. It gives you a commitment. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. And whenever that passion goes away, I think it's time to look for another career, because it's a profession that demands that type of commitment. And if you don't have a passion for it, I think there are other ways to make a living that would be much easier. One of the things that I have done over the years, and I've been incredibly lucky, I've changed career paths frequently. I went into private practice with a major firm, with Hunt & Williams in Richmond. After 3 years, I came to Knoxville to help them open up a new office, so we started a firm from scratch. I left there and went to Miami to work with the Securities Exchange Commission. I went from there in-house to Philip Morris, working on the tobacco litigation. From there, I helped Hunt & Williams reopen their litigation practice in New York and grew it, and then went to White & Case and became a partner and was a partner there. And now I'm Chief Trial Counsel for the Education Law Center and Public Service, and constantly doing new things opens you up to new ideas, which I think continues to help you develop as a leader. I was better in every position because of the work that I had done previously. And so I continue to look for those new opportunities that are a little bit scary and a little bit intimidating, but so far they've all been worth the effort, and I've been very, very fortunate in that regard.